Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome. And my name is Habib Bobat. We are busy discussing the beautiful city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Madinatul Munawwara. Up to this point, we have discussed many chapters of this beautiful city. And I would strongly recommend that you follow all the episodes before this also to get a beautiful and deep understanding of this Mubarak place, so that when you visit Madinatul Munawwara, you have a deeper appreciation for the beautiful city and the illuminated city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today we are going to look at another chapter, and we are looking at the graveyard of Baqi al-Gharqad, which we often refer to in our conversations as Jannatul Baqi. Now, Baqi al-Gharqad was the primary land where the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum would bury their loved ones after the demise. During the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it serves as the primary ground for the people of Medina even up to this day. Baqi al-Gharqad is a very important place. The Prophet ﷺ used to make it a point to visit this place, especially when he would be spending the night with Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. He would reserve a portion of the night where he would go and visit Jannatul Baqi, and he would make dua for the people of Baqi. And he used to read the dua, Assalamu alaikum أهل الديار من المؤمنين والمسلمين وإنا إن شاء الله بكم لاحقون. And he would be making specific dua for the people of Baqi. How fortunate are the souls that rest in a place where their Nabi makes dua for them. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. So, Baqi is an important place. Do you know what was the size of this place, this plot, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ? Just 80 square meters. 80 square meters. And today, it expands to 175,000 square meters. Subhanallah. From 80 square meters to 175,000 square meters. In the cemetery, they lie very, very important people, like the Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet ﷺ, the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ, the son of the Prophet ﷺ. And likewise, in this graveyard is the aunts of the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, there are approximately 10,000 companions who are buried here. 10,000. Likewise, there are illustrious Imams, the likes of Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, the like of Imam Nafi' rahmatullah alayh. Likewise, great Tabi'un are buried here, and important figures are buried here. The wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are buried here. Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala is buried here. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiyallahu ta'ala is buried here. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala is buried here. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu ta'ala, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, buried here. Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiyallahu ta'ala is buried here. There are many notable figures who are buried in Jannatul Baqi. When you go to Madinatul Munawwara, you must make it a point to visit Jannatul Baqi and to visit this place, not for the purposes of just visiting, but to take a lesson and to also make dua for the people and the occupants of Jannatul Baqi. So let's talk about these important people that are buried in Jannatul Baqi. The first set of graves that we can look at is the grave of Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, the beloved daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the daughter of Hassan, that is the son of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Hassan ibn Ali, and the third person is Abbas. These three graves are in one area. When you enter the graveyard and you go to the right hand side, when you enter the Baqi cemetery, this is where they are located. Now what I must highlight here is that the transformation that took place to the graveyard during the Ottomans' time, and also the rules before that, there were many buildings and structures in the Baqi cemetery around the key sites of the people that are buried there. But during the Saudi era, they demolished all those solid structures and bringing it back to the simplicity level that is required. So today also when you go there, there are no boards. There are no boards of the people that are buried there. It's just through historical accounts you are familiar with the sites of the people that are buried there. But up to this point, because they continue to use the cemetery, people don't have any physical boards there to indicate who is buried where. Currently, the system is they snake you in and they snake you out. And many of these areas and the sites that we are going to talk about are cordoned off and not accessible to the public. It could change in the future. It was different in the past. People could access these areas, but from time to time they change the protocols in order to best manage this place. So when you enter the cemetery and you go to the right, there's an area that's cordoned off. That's the grave of Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, Hassan ibn Ali Hassan, and Abbas radiallahu ta'ala an. They are buried in this area. Fatima radiallahu ta'ala an was the beloved daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was the only of the children to survive after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His 3 sons and his other daughters all passed away in his life. But Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha lived after him for at least 6 months. There was a point where the Prophet of Allah was talking to her closer to his demise, and he spoke to her and she was sad. And then he spoke to her again and she was happy. After the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha asked Fatima that, "Oh Fatima, what happened? I had observed that you were talking to your father and then you were sad and then you spoke to him again and then you were happy." So she said, "My father said to me that I will be passing away soon. So that saddened me. And then my father said to me that I will be the first of his family to unite with him after his demise. So that made me happy." And 6 months later, she passed away. When she passed away, she made a wasiyah and a bequest that when you bury me and carry me in such a way that it does not give off the shape of my body. I want you to use the hodaj. Hodaj is a carriage that they used to use when they would travel in their time. So she wanted that her body should be concealed off from the passerby and the people that are attending the janazah, and her body must be totally concealed in a carriage and taken to the place of burial. This is the amount of modesty and bashfulness she had even after her demise, that she was so concerned that when I'm passing away, I do not want to be exposed in any way. May Allah, use this as an example for our own modesty and bashfulness in our life. Ameen. The next person that is buried there is Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet of Allah was very fond of him. Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu accepted Islam, but he kept his Islam a secret until the Prophet of Allah allowed for him to become public, or for the Iman to become public. He remained in Mecca even after his Islam. And he is the person who served as a link between Mecca and Madinah. He used to provide all critical intelligence for the Prophet of Allah as far as whatever developments was taking place in Mecca. The people of Mecca were not aware that Abbas has accepted Islam. So he was very close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he migrated, the Prophet of Allah allocated a property for him also. And when he passed away, obviously the people of Medina buried him in this particular area. And obviously, then you have Hassan radiallahu ta'ala an. And the next set of graves that we can look at in Jannatul Baqi or Baqi al-Gharqad is the aunts of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Atika and Safiya. These two are the sisters of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala an, and the aunts of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Safiya is the mother of Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, who is one of the 10 people who have been given the glad tidings of Jannah. So she is also buried in Jannatul Baqi. And Atika is also buried in Jannatul Baqi. These are the two aunts of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Moving on in brief, we look at the next set of graves. We look at the graves of the daughters of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, namely Zainab, Ruqayya and Kulthum radiyallahu ta'ala anhunna ajma'in. Zainab is the eldest daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, Zainab radiallahu ta'ala anha is also buried in Baqi al-Gharqad, in Jannatul Baqi. She was the eldest daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she was from Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. We know that when her husband was captured in the Battle of Badr, she had sent the necklace of her mother Khadija in lieu for the ransom of her husband, Abu al-As. When the Prophet of Allah saw the necklace, he became emotional and he spoke to the Sahaba about it. And because this evoked sentiments and emotions for the Prophet ﷺ, and the Sahaba said, "O Nabi of Allah, we will not accept any ransom for Abu al-As, the husband of your daughter Zainab radiallahu ta'ala an." The Prophet of Allah said that, "I will let you go, O Abu al-As, on condition that when you return to Mecca, you will make arrangements for my daughter to come to Medina." And essentially that is what happened. And she stayed in Medina, and the Prophet of Allah ﷺ also lived with her, meaning in that period. And then she passed away, and she is also buried in Baqi. When we return, we look at the other daughters of the Prophet ﷺ. Welcome back. We are busy discussing the graveyard of Baqi of Madinatul Munawwara. We are discussing the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ, and namely Zainab radiallahu ta'ala anha. She is the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, and from her, the granddaughter of the Prophet ﷺ was Zainab. Her daughter was Umama. Umama bint Zainab or Umama bint Abil As. This granddaughter of Zainab is the same granddaughter that appears in the books of Hadith, that the Prophet of Allah one day came out of his house holding his granddaughter, and he led the Sahaba in Salah. The Prophet of Allah was very fond of his family, of course. The next daughter of the Prophet of Allah that we can discuss, who is buried in Baqi, is Ruqayya radiyallahu ta'ala anha. She is also from Khadija radiyallahu ta'ala an. She was initially married to Uthman ibn Affan, and she then passed away in his marriage. When the Prophet of Allah was in Badr, the Prophet of Allah told Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu to remain behind. He was nursing her, and just as he finished the burial procession of Ruqayya radiyallahu ta'ala an, he received the news of the victory of the people of Badr. So on one side, the Prophet of Allah had the victory of Badr, and on the other side, he had to deal with the sad demise of his beloved daughter. Can you imagine what a painful event that must have been? A mixture of emotions. Victory on one side, and the demise of his daughter on the other side. The Prophet of Allah subsequently, after that, wedded Kulthum to Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an. And that is why he is known as Dhun Nurayn, the possessor of two lights. So these three daughters of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, including Fatima, the fourth one, are all buried in Baqi al-Gharqad. So when we go there, we must be cognizant of this fact. The next set of graves that we are important to talk about is the graves of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So his wives, Aisha, Hafsa, Juwayriya, Zainab, Sauda, Habiba, Zainab bint Jahash, Safiya bint Huyay, and Salama, they are buried in Madinatul Munawwara, except for two of his wives. That is Khadija radiyallahu ta'ala anha. She is buried in Mecca. And Maymuna radiyallahu ta'ala anha is buried in Sarif, also outside of Mecca, but now it's part of Mecca. So Maymuna radiyallahu ta'ala anha, very interestingly, she chose to be buried in the spot, and she said, "I would like to be buried at the same place where I spent the first night with my husband, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam." So her first night was also spent here, and when she passed away, she was also buried here in Sarif. Today, when you go to Mecca, they will indicate to you the place where Sarif is and where the grave of Maymuna radiyallahu ta'ala anha is found. The next set of graves that we can talk about in Jannatul Baqi is the graves of the martyrs of Harra. Now, this is a sad incident in the history of the Muslims. In the year 63 after Hijrah, Medina was basically confronted with a challenge. Yazid was the ruler, the Umayyad ruler of the Muslims, and the people of Medina were basically not in agreement with his leadership. And as would happen in any case, the ruler did not approve of this because he felt that if this was not quelled and squashed, then it could have ripple effects in different parts of the Khilafah. As a result, he did what he did, and he sent Uqba, his general, to Medina, and the battle of Harra ensued. The battle lasted less than a day, but the carnage and the pillage that ensued after that is horrendous. Horrendous in the sense that 10,000 people lost their lives in this incident. Amongst them were Sahaba also, and amongst them were people who by-hearted the Quran. They say at least 1,700 Qurra, people who had memorized the Quran, were martyred in this battle. So they are also buried in Jannatul Baqi, in this graveyard. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon them. The next grave we're going to talk about is the grave of Sayyiduna Uthman ibn Affan, the third righteous Khalifa of Islam. Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan is not an ordinary person. He is the son-in-law of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he is also the Khalifa of the Muslimin. He was already told in his lifetime that he will be assassinated. The Prophet of Allah said to him that, "O Uthman, the people will try to remove the mantle and the garment of Khilafah. You must be patient." And so Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala an bore all these difficulties with great patience and with great sabr. The Sahaba were present in Madinah when they surrounded his house. The senior Sahaba even insisted on providing protection for Sayyidina Uthman. But he insisted that I do not want any bloodshed because of me. I do not want the blood of any Muslim to flow because of me. So he refused to take any security. He was in his house. He was continuing with his Quran tilawah when the rebels scaled the wall of his house, and whilst in the state of reading Quran, they assassinated him. There was a scuffle that ensued. Some Sahaba did try to intervene, but it was already at a critical moment. His wife Naila also tried to intervene, in which she injured herself and a finger was cut. The blood of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was preserved in the Mus'haf, which is still preserved and believed to be in the Muslim world. So Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was assassinated in this fashion, and he is buried in Baqi. Today, the easiest way to point out is when you are at his grave, when you look in the direction of the masjid, it aligns with the green dome. More or less, it aligns with the green dome. And the Prophet ﷺ had already prophesied this, that Uthman will be martyred. His grave is also in Jannatul Baqi. You must be aware of that when you do go to the graveyard. The next grave we're going to talk about is Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala an. He is one of the great transmitters of hadith. He was a youngster in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he has transmitted 1,170 narrations from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is also buried in Jannatul Baqi. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, his name appears very often in the books of hadith, included in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. 111 narrations appear in Bukhari and Muslim jointly, and then there's 52 narrations that appear alone in Sahih Muslim and 17 alone in Sahih al-Bukhari. He is buried in Jannatul Baqi. The next grave we're going to talk about is the grave of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiyallahu ta'ala an. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh is a great Sahabi of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the people of Ansar. He accepted Islam when Mus'ab bin Umair migrated to Medina, and he became the Qari and the teacher of the people of Medina. And because of the Islam of because of the Islam of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, many people behind him also accepted Islam because he was the leader amongst them. And in the narration of Bukhari, it is mentioned that the Arsh, the throne of Allah, shook upon the demise of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiyallahu ta'ala an. This tells you of the great status and the honor and the rank of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiyallahu ta'ala an. The next grave we're going to talk about is the grave of Ibrahim radiallahu ta'ala an, the son of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet of Allah had children. All his children were from Khadija radiallahu ta'ala an, and one son he had was from a slave girl known as Maria al-Qibtiyya. The Christian ruler of Alexandria had gifted the Prophet of Allah Maria al-Qibtiyya. She's also known as Mary the Copt. The Prophet ﷺ was gifted Maria al-Qibtiyya in the 7th year after Hijrah. And with her he had a son whose name was Ibrahim radiallahu ta'ala an. The Prophet of Allah was very fond of him, and he would visit him regularly. But he passed away in his infancy when he was just barely 2 years of age. The day he passed away, there was a solar eclipse that took place in Madinah. And there was speculation that maybe because of the passing away of Ibrahim radiallahu ta'ala anhu, this phenomenon has taken place where the solar eclipse has occurred. And the Prophet of Allah clarified the matter to the Sahaba, saying that the sun and the moon, they belong to Allah. They do not eclipse for anybody's demise or for any important event that takes place in the world. It's purely part of the system of Allah. It is not because of the passing away of anybody. The last set of graves that we can look at is Imam Malik and Imam Nafi rahmatullah alayh. Imam Malik was known as Imam Dar al-Hijrah, the Imam of Madinah. He is one of the four Imams, the four illustrious Imams that we follow. He is known as Imam Dar al-Hijrah, and there is a prophecy that is made by the Prophet ﷺ that there will come a person for whom people will come from far and wide to seek knowledge. And many scholars interpret this to be Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, because during his time people from different parts of the Muslim world used to come to Medina to be seeking knowledge from him. He is buried in Medina in Jannatul Baqi, and next to him is Imam Nafi rahmatullah alayh, who is one of the transmitters of Quran. As you know that there are many ways of reciting the Quran, modes of reciting the Quran. One of them is through Imam Nafi rahmatullah alayh. So as we wrap up this discussion, you have the Ahlul Bayt, the wives, the daughters, the uncle, the aunts of the Prophet ﷺ buried in Jannatul Baqi, the son of the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, the people of Harra, the 10,000 of them, and 10,000 companions that are buried here, Imam Malik and Imam Nafi rahmatullah alayh. When we do visit Jannatul Baqi, we must be aware of this, insha'Allah.